In part one, I discussed all the big changes going on in our solar system, like global warming on Mars, Pluto, and one of Neptune's moons. The 2,500% brightness increase in Venus and changes in the sun, among other changes. I also covered Earth changes like the axis tilting and the recent upsurge in the Schumann resonance. For this video, I will answer questions like, why is the Mandela effect happening? How is the Mandela effect happening? Why do flip-flops happen? How did we get to this new timeline or new Earth? How did we get to this new reality or dimension? What role does CERN play in the ME? I will also address the ear ringing that many people in the ME community are experiencing. We'll also talk about why some are experiencing the Mandela effect while others are not. And I will answer the question of why some people have a lot of the same memories as people in the ME community, but refuse to acknowledge the Mandela effect as being a real thing. Feel like there's not enough or a lot of people really talking about the link between the rising Schumann resonance, changes in our solar system, and the Mandela effect. I'm also going to get into electromagnetic shifts and our brainwaves. Now, just a short disclaimer before I start. I do not claim to know everything. I'm just an individual who has been Mandela affected, who is trying to figure out what is really going on, just like everyone else who has been hit by the Mandela effect. I reserve the right to change my mind at any point as new information presents itself to me. This theory is basically the result of lots of research I've done, and thus far, this theory seems to be the best or the most accurate conclusion for the cause of the ME that I can find so far. So, in part one, I already covered what the Schumann resonance is. If you didn't see part one, the Schumann resonance is basically the electromagnetic field that surrounds Earth. It goes to the edge of Earth's atmosphere or stratosphere and is composed of electromagnetic waves made up of electrons and ionized atoms. And just to give y'all a visual of what exactly it looks like, go ahead and take a look at this.
An unknown scientist was about to make a discovery that could have changed everything. His name was Winifred Otto Schumann. On the day in question, he was teaching his students about the physics of electricity, how the Earth and the ionosphere is a sphere within a sphere, which can create electrical tension and subsequently a frequency. Schumann instructed his class to calculate the tension that would exist in between. Having no idea himself, Schumann also began to calculate. Eventually, he arrived at a frequency, one of approximately 10 Hertz. As incredible as it seemed to Schumann, our planet had a pulse, a measurable frequency that surrounded life on Earth. Although the professor was proud of his find, he did not see it as a hugely significant one. It would take several years and an incredible twist of fate before the professor would begin to realize the true importance of Schumann resonance. That twist of fate had begun 30 years earlier, with another German scientist by the name of Hans Berger. Using an EEG machine he had built himself, Berger made the first ever recording of electrical frequency transmitted by the human brain. It was initially suggested the wave be named after the man who discovered it, but Berger, being a modest man, called it the alpha wave. Dr. Ankermüller, another German scientist, put two and two together and instantly realized the magnitude of what was in front of him. The frequency of the alpha waves recorded by Hans Berger were nearly identical to Schumann resonance, the frequency of the Earth. Dr. Ankermüller immediately contacted Schumann to further investigate. They studied in detail how tension is discharged by lightning in the Earth's ionospheric cavity. Eventually, they came up with an exact frequency. The pulse of the Earth, Schumann resonance, was exactly 7.83 Hertz. The discovery was remarkable. Schumann resonance was not just similar to the alpha waves of the human brain, it was identical. The brain's frequency, which controls our creativity, our performance, our stress, our anxiety, and our immune system, had somehow tuned in to the frequency of the planet. The pulse of the Earth had become the pulse of life itself. So what did all this mean? It was not long before somebody tried to find out. His name was Rutger Weaver, an acclaimed scientist from the Max Planck Institute. In the early 1960s, the professor constructed an underground bunker in order to examine the circadian rhythm of man. The circadian rhythm is the day-night cycle, which is engraved into all life. Over a 30-year period, the professor conducted experiments in which student volunteers would spend several weeks at a time living in the bunker, completely shielded from the natural resonances of the Earth. In his results, Weaver noted some astonishing findings. He discovered that when Schumann resonance was filtered out of the bunker, the students' physical and mental health suffered severely. Weaver would secretly introduce the 7.83 Hertz frequency into the bunker using an electromagnetic pulse generator. Every time he did so, he noted the ill effects suffered by the volunteers either disappeared or decreased. Their headaches and emotional distress was reduced, and their sense of well-being was restored, all by the introduction of Schumann resonance. Weaver's research had revealed an incredible connection between human health and the natural frequency of the planet. And in 2011, groundbreaking research suggested something even more impressive. That Schumann resonance can be connected to the beginning of life itself. The breakthrough came at the hands of Luc Montagnier, the Nobel Prize-winning scientist who first discovered the HIV virus. The professor was conducting water memory experiments when he stumbled upon something that would shake one of the very core principles of science. All life comes from life. That was a fundamental principle of science that had never been violated. It was thought that life could only exist where life had existed before, and the mechanism for this was always understood to be a material one, such as egg and sperm, or spore and cell division. But Luc's experiments offered a very different hypothesis. DNA sequences, the very building blocks of life, communicate with each other in water by emitting low-frequency electromagnetic waves. Even when the DNA was in separate test tubes, the professor still recorded electromagnetic communication between them. Communication so sophisticated as to form nucleotides, the very ingredient for life itself. Scientists have attempted similar experiments countless times before. How had Luke managed to achieve what no other scientist could, and create life where no life was present? What was so different about Luke's experiment? There was the presence of a frequency which when removed would cause the experiment to fail, but when present would ensure its success. That frequency was 7.83 Hz, the Schumann resonance. How did all this happen? Well, when you look at the history of the Earth, it seems pretty obvious. Schumann waves have been part of this planet since the very beginning. Life is surrounded by them, and inevitably tuned in. Does it stand to reason that such an acute sensitivity would be affected by even the smallest change in the electromagnetic environment?
So I hope that video gave you guys a better understanding of the significance of the Schumann resonance. It's important to note that the resonance of the Schumann resonance fluctuates as the ionosphere becomes more or less dense, which depends mostly on the amount of solar radiation striking it. Also, electricity from lightning influences the frequency of the Schumann resonance. At any given time, the Earth is struck by lightning about, I think it's 100 times every single second. And one lightning bolt can contain up to 1 billion volts of electricity. And this is according to the National Geographic. Now, this sounds like a lot of electricity, but keep in mind that changes in the Schumann resonance depends a lot on solar radiation that comes from the sun as well. And like I said, the ionosphere actually becomes more or less dense depending on the amount of solar radiation striking it. Kind of makes you wonder how the 130% increase in the sun's magnetic field that I discussed in my other video is impacting the Schumann resonance. Now, how does the Mandela effect relate to the Schumann resonance? To answer that, I want to get into how the Schumann resonance impacts humans in terms of just general health. The Schumann resonance directly influences our blood pressure, cardiac and neurological diseases, reaction time, neuroendocrine sensitivities, violence, and war. And this is according to a peer-reviewed study by Miller, published in the Journal of Consciousness Exploration and Research in 2013. I just want to read a quote from that research study. Quote, "Research has shown that the Schumann resonance can modulate human health indicators such as blood pressure, cardiac and neurological disease, reaction time, neuroendocrine sensitivities, violence, and war. It also correlates with sunspot activity, mass human excitability, sociability, and climate change." Soetbert Ertel in Burst of Creativity Correlate with Solar Activity examined the association between solar activity and oscillations in human creativity. His findings showed that during increased solar activity, human creative activity also peaks. I can't even pronounce it. Tashevsky agreed that the influence on human nervous systems is greatest during peaks of emitted energy by the sun and radiation of the earth. Chemical bonds are magnetic bonds formed between adjacent atoms through paired electrons having opposite spins and thus attracted magnetically. Unquote. Now, those are just a couple of the ways that the Schumann resonance affects us. How does it impact brain waves, our consciousness, our memory, perhaps our ability to hold on to our memories of the old Earth reality? Before I answer that, just a brief overview of how our brain waves relate to our awareness. According to one of the first neurological clinical practices called BrainWorks, based out of the UK, and I quote, "At the root of all thoughts, emotions, and behaviors is the communication between neurons within our brains. Brain waves are produced by synchronized electrical pulses from masses of neurons communicating with each other. Brain waves are best thought of as a continuous spectrum of consciousness from slow, loud, and functional to fast, subtle, and complex," unquote. So, like the Schumann resonance of Earth, brainwave speed is measured in hertz. That's spelled Hertz, and they are divided into bands that can be slow, moderate, and fast pulsing waves. As y'all can see from the chart below, each kind of brain wave relates directly to our state of awareness. Beta brain waves are 14 to 30 hertz. Alpha brain waves are 8 to 13.9 hertz. Theta brain waves are 4 to 7.9 hertz. And the delta brain waves are 0.1 to 3.9 hertz. Now notice how as the hertz number gets smaller, brain waves become associated more with unconsciousness or being unconscious. Basically, the higher the hertz or faster the wave, the more conscious the mind becomes. Each chart is a little off by 1 or 2 points with the hertz, but they generally show the same idea. And this is just a rudimentary explanation just because I don't want this video to get to be too long. But basically, delta waves are correlated with detached awareness, and theta waves are correlated with meditation, intuition, and memory. The alpha waves are associated with relaxation, creativity, and visualization. And the beta brain waves are associated with alertness and concentration. And it turns out there is a brain wave that's even higher than beta called gamma. And the gamma brain wave is 30 to 100 hertz. Now, as I'm going over all of these different kinds of brain waves, just keep in mind that our brain waves have evolved to sync up with the Schumann resonance of Earth. So the hertz measurement of our brains basically matches with the hertz measurement of the Schumann resonance. So gamma brain waves are associated with insight, peak focus levels, and expanded consciousness. According to the neurological clinical practice called BrainWorks, the mind has to be quiet to access the gamma brainwave state. The gamma relates to rapid, simultaneous information processing in multiple areas of the brain at one time. Quote, "Gamma brain waves modulate perception and consciousness, and increased gamma brain waves related to expanded consciousness and spiritual emergence," unquote. It seems like the higher the brainwave hertz, the more aware or spiritually evolved someone may become. And this is really interesting when you consider that the hertz of the Schumann resonance of Earth is becoming higher and higher. As the Schumann resonance increases, so does the hertz of our brainwaves, because the two are actually, they're directly connected to each other. As this is happening, more and more people are waking up to the Mandela effect. Now, with that in mind, I just want to read a short quote from a study published in the Journal of Consciousness Exploration and Research. Quote, "The resonant cavity formed between the ionosphere and Earth produces rhythmic waves capable of entraining and phase locking with brain waves," unquote. Could it be that people experiencing the Mandela effect have locked into a specific Schumann frequency wave that has entrained some people's brain waves, which has enhanced their awareness? I mean, after all, the research says that theta brain waves are associated with memory. How is it some people are aware of a reality that existed in a different wavelength frequency, where the chick in Chick-fil-A was spelled CHIC and Coke Zero existed, a reality where there was something on the North Pole? Want to continue reading a little bit more from this study. Quote, "We are bathed in a sea of natural low-frequency electromagnetic EM fields from conception to death. The brain is an electromagnetic system synchronized by the Schumann resonance signal that continuously stabilizes the brain wave activity. The frequencies of EEG brain waves coincide with the range of SR, Schumann frequency activity. Blackman established that external electromagnetic ELF signals induced altered neuron calcium ion effluxes in brain tissue. Stable synchronizing of the brain's electromagnetic systems underpins thinking, emotion, memory, and intelligence. Significantly, the hippocampal wave, which exerts a decisive influence on brain function and long-term memory, shares the same frequency as the primary Schumann resonance 7.8 Hertz. I will read those last two sentences again, so that way everybody can just really reflect on how it relates to the ME. Okay, guys? Stable synchronizing of the brain's electromagnetic system underpins thinking, emotion, memory, and intelligence. Significantly, the hippocampal wave, which exerts a decisive influence on brain function and long-term memory, that's long-term memory, shares the same frequency as the primary Schumann resonance 7.83 Hertz, unquote. Was there an Earth reality that existed at 7.83 Hertz or whatever Hertz number? Was there an Earth reality that existed at that measurement? But now that the Schumann resonance is erratically increasing, we are able to perceive another Earth, possibly overlapping over the old Earth reality with the old Hertz amount. And this is where we may want to consider if the ME is some kind of a dimensional and or perceptual shift. And I say dimension because I believe that all the dimensions exist simultaneously in one space. And what separates dimensions is just frequencies, or our ability to tap into a specific dimension's frequency in order to see it. This theory may explain why some are seeing the ME while others are oblivious to it. Maybe the people who are blind to it have not shifted their own brain waves and their perception. For whatever reason, these people are not as sensitive to the current changes in the Schumann resonance. But I have a feeling that as the Schumann resonance continues to become more erratic, that their brain waves and their ability to see the ME will be affected. Now, whether or not these people choose to still remain in a state of denial about the ME being real in spite of their own memories of the old reality is an entirely different thing. I venture to say that some who can even see the difference between the original memories and the memories of the new earth reality will fight to go against their own original memories and won't want to overcome their own cognitive dissonance. They will swear up and down that the ME is not real, even though their own original memories match ours. Is that the definition of a strong delusion? Maybe. Now, according to electrical engineer and researcher Louis B. Hainsworth, quote, human health is linked with geophysical parameters by way of the naturally occurring Schumann's ELF. His hypothesis identified naturally occurring features which determine the frequency spectrum of human brainwave rhythms. The frequencies of naturally occurring electromagnetic signals circulating in the electrically resonant cavity bounded by the Earth and the ionosphere have governed or determined the evolution or development of the frequencies of operation of the principal human brainwave signals, in particular the alpha rhythm. Hainsworth concluded that the frequencies of human brain waves evolved in response to these signals. Conditions for evolutionary changes in human brain wave patterns have now been established. Unquote. I find it pretty interesting what the study has to say about a tune system. It says a tune system consists of at least two oscillators of identical resonant frequencies. If one oscillator starts emitting, the other will be activated by the signal very shortly. In the process of resonance entrainment or kindling, igniting the resonance phenomenon among neurons, it becomes obvious that in deep meditation, when waves of alpha and theta rhythms cascade across the entire brain, a resonance is possible between the human being and the planet. Energy and information which are embedded in a field are transferred. Perhaps the planet communicates with us in this primal language of frequencies, according to Hainsworth. The influence of naturally occurring Schumann's resonance signals on brain wave pattern evolution is formally stated to show that lower power electrical fields could produce evolutionary change, unquote. I think this evolutionary change just very well may be what we are seeing with the Mandela effect. This chart serves as a visual for my theory on how the Schumann resonance impacts the electromagnetic field, which in turn shifts the brain waves of people who are sensitive to the electromagnetic fields frequencies. And this causes people to experience the Mandela effect. Now, keep in mind, there is definitely an external source that is causing the Schumann resonance on Earth to become erratic. That same source, I think, is impacting our planets in our solar system as well. I covered that in part 1. But, and I will definitely get to that in my next video. I think this theory may actually answer questions like, how did we get to this new timeline or new Earth? How did we get to this new reality or dimension? We didn't physically move anywhere. Reality is perception. Perception is reality. It is impossible. It is impossible to separate the observed from the observer. It's impossible to separate the observer from the observed. This is evident with the research of Dr. Robert Lanza and countless other studies. Our perception or our brain waves changed due to the electromagnetic waves of the Schumann resonance. You could say that our brain waves became synced up with or synchronized with the higher Schumann resonance and opened up the door to a new reality. This entrainment between the Schumann resonance and our brain waves switched our reality / perception of reality to a dimensional frequency where it appears as though we are no longer in the Sagittarius arm, our heart is no longer on the left side, and so on with the Emmy examples. At this point, some people may be asking, well, if that's the case, then why do flip-flops occur? So, for those who don't know, flip-flops are when the Emmy example flips back and forth. I think flip-flops happen because we are still in the process of locking into the other Earth frequency. Just as our brain waves are not locked into a constant wavelength all the time, the Schumann resonance can be erratic and fluctuates at times as well. We have to remember, folks, that this is not a single event. This is an evolutionary transitional process that is going to take quite some time. Until we are fully synced up with the higher Schumann resonance, we will continue to occasionally see some flip-flops between the higher frequency Earths and the lower frequency Earths. I believe flip-flops will continue to happen on both an individual and a collective level. It's nothing to get too freaked out about. At first glance, this may all sound kind of crazy, but is it really such a silly idea to think about, or to think that changes in brain waves can totally alter our reality? I mean, after all, when we dream, our brain literally switches from alpha brain waves to theta brain waves, and we enter a totally new reality. When we're dreaming, we never stop in the dream and try to figure out how our physical body was moved to a reality within a dream where things are different. A lot of times within my dreams, the reality is very similar to this waking reality with just a few minor changes. Now, don't get me wrong, I have had dreams where things look totally different, but not all the time. Since humans were humans, our bodies have evolved under the Schumann resonance of 7.83 hertz. Now that the Schumann resonance has been increasing, it's only common sense that it would start to affect us on a deeper level, on a brainwave level. As stated in the peer-reviewed study published by the Journal of Consciousness Exploration and Research, quote, "All biological processes are a function of electromagnetic field interactions. EM fields are the connecting link between the world of form and resonant patterns. They store gestalts or patterns of information. The bridge connecting solar system resonances and brain frequencies resides in our human DNA helix, which co-evolved in Earth's environment." The study goes on to say that Schumann resonance modulates the set point of our consciousness and biology. Living tissues detect, absorb, and utilize electromagnetic signals within some frequency ranges and completely ignore other frequencies naturally encountered in the frequency spectrum. We are in tune with Schumann resonances, which drive brainwave ELF patterns in a set range of grouped frequencies. Some describe antenna-like qualities in the brainwave 8 to 12 cycle range. We have electromagnetic transmitters and receivers in our neurons, including a phase-locked loop system. Our brains detect and respond to the Schumann resonance signal through nonlinear resonant matching of frequency, altering optimal melatonin-serotonin cycle balance, cardiac, neurological, reproductive health, and mortality. Solar storms modulate daily variation of the D region reflected and daily variation in the Schumann resonance signal strength. This primal lightning-driven Schumann resonance pulse calibrates us and enhances our physical and mental well-being. We are all tuned to that wave, which correlates with a relaxed and creative mind. I really think this theory answers the question of why some are affected by the ME while others who are right beside us are living in the old reality where the ME, it's just not a thing for them. I don't claim to know all the answers, but I think our ears ringing may have something to do with our perception shifting into a different frequency. Some have referred to this as the tearing of the veil. What if each time the veil tore a little bit, it literally made an audible sound or tone? Some speculate that the ear ringing has something to do with CERN, but I personally don't believe that, because as a child, I can remember being 4 and 5 years old and hearing that same ringing or tone in my ears. I heard it off and on all throughout my whole childhood, but as I got older, the ringing became less frequent until it actually stopped for a couple of years. As an adult, I didn't hear the ringing at all until I started to go through kind of an awakening process a few years ago. And as I start to become more spiritual, the ear ringing seems to happen a lot more often. I think the ear ringing is a very individual thing. By that, I mean the tone cannot be heard by everyone at the same time. If the ear ringing was caused by CERN and it was just a matter of them flipping a switch or doing their experiments, then I think the majority of the people would be experiencing the same pattern of ear ringing at the exact same time. Like I've discussed in previous videos, I'm really starting to think that shifts in the Schumann resonance are creating a sort of slight opening in the veil that is impacting each individual's frequency. You could be standing in a room with a group of people and only you or a few people could be experiencing the ear ringing because the Schumann resonance seems to impact different people in different ways. For whatever reason, some people are more sensitive to the shifts in the Schumann resonance than others because of their unique individual makeup. Don't let CERN trick you into believing that they are doing this and it's solely them. It's only them. Don't let them have you think that. That's why they are going out of their way, you know, to have all of these juvenile little fake ritual ceremonies and, you know, have the Bond #1 Mandela sign man jamming out on camera. It's a big smokescreen, people. They know that with fear comes control, and you know, they may have the technology to slightly manipulate or tinker with the electromagnetic field and cause little changes, make a couple changes to the Bible, but compared to the Schumann resonant frequency of the whole earth, they really don't have full control over this evolutionary process and what's happening. Don't be deceived, folks. Thank you for watching my video. So I thought I would need no more than 2 videos to explain everything, but I've decided that I'm going to make a part 3. I didn't want this video to be too long, so in part 3, my next video, I'm going to explain what is causing the Schumann resonance to increase, as well as what's causing the changes to our sun and other planets that I covered in part 1. So thanks for listening and take care. Stay tuned to part 3.